For 25 years, Anna had been living in a small coastal town where she was born and raised. Here she finished school and met the love of her life, a tall, dark-haired man with a kind heart. Her husband adored her, and Anna had nothing to complain about. She ran a cozy cafe in the old district, right on the waterfront. Here she spent all her days, except Sundays. Anna loved everything about her job, opening the old, slightly weathered shutters of a beautiful emerald shade early in the morning, wiping tables and neatly arranging chairs, each with its own story, watering plants in pots of various shapes and sizes, gazing for hours through large windows at the sea, which changed shades and moods every day, lighting candles on the tables and turning on golden garlands in the evenings, and finally, brewing fragrant coffee and baking treats for the guests herself. Oh, this was what Anna loved the most. Every moment of the process brought her true pleasure. Anna adored kneading dough, rolling it out on a large wooden board, and then cutting out sea stars, shells, and little fish to bake her signature sea cookies, which local children adored. Besides cookies, she baked pies and pastries, which she also decorated in a maritime style. No wonder her cafe was called Song of the Sea, and every tourist visiting their town felt obligated to visit it. Anna's parents lived nearby, so after work, she often popped in to visit them. They weren't wealthy. Anna's mother, Ines, was a seamstress who still took orders, and her father, Jose, repaired old cars. However, no one ever heard a complaint from them. Anna's parents still lived in the same house where the girl grew up. Every corner here, curtains, shelves, rugs, patterned napkins on dressers, tiles with birds in the bathroom reminded her of her childhood. From the living room window, she could see the old lighthouse where she often ran in her childhood, and every time she looked at it, Anna sighed softly. In these moments, she invariably approached her mother and hugged her tightly. "You're not to blame for anything, Anna," Ines repeated every time, understanding the cause of her daughter's sadness perfectly. She sighed too and hugged her daughter tightly. The memories evoked by the sight of the lighthouse were not the happiest for Anna, and perhaps it was the only thing that clouded the girl's life. Otherwise, she could only be envied. Once upon a time, at the very beginning of spring, a bookstore opened next to Anna's cafe. For their little town, this was unheard of and somewhat strange. Books, and on the waterfront no less. Who would buy them here? Tourists usually were interested in local trinkets, cheap shell jewelry, and, of course, places where they could have a tasty bite. As for books, Anna seriously doubted that anyone would cross the threshold of the new store. Therefore, she became curious to meet the owners of the bookstore, and after another day of work, she decided to stop by and get to know them. Bringing along half of the most delicious blueberry cheesecake, on which she had drawn waves and flying seagulls with cream that morning, as well as a bag of raspberry croissants, Anna set off to meet her neighbors. Pulling open the heavy glass door, the woman entered a small but cozy space. A golden bell on the door greeted her with a pleasant chime. Anna looked around and immediately realized how wrong she was. Now she was sure that this place would become very popular among tourists. Thick oak shelves were intentionally aged, everywhere hung fishing nets, and colorful paper boats dangled from the ceiling. Among the books, Anna noticed mysterious-looking bottles made of darkened glass. Surely, they could contain half-erased messages. Pirate maps hung on the walls, with crosses marking the places where treasures were hidden. Anna's eyes lit up. In her childhood, she adored adventures and everything related to mysteries and puzzles. She remembered how she listened with open-mouthed awe to the terrifying stories of the old lighthouse keeper Alberto and believed every word he said. Anna seriously thought that mermaids, Sea King Maialobo, his daughter Pincoya, and pink dolphin werewolves really existed. "Can I help you with something?" A young woman peeked out from behind a tall shelf in the far corner of the room in response to the bell's ringing. She was of short stature and very charming, with long shiny hair braided. "I'm the owner of the neighboring cafe," Anna explained and gave her name. "I came here to meet you and wish you good luck." "Oh, how sweet of you," the girl replied. "I've already seen your cafe. Song of the Sea, such a romantic name. You see, my husband and I moved to your town just 2 weeks ago. I've been wanting to come visit you for several days now, but I never seem to have enough time. By the way, I'm Pilar, the owner of this shop. Anna responded with a smile and offered her a treat. This is for you. Congratulations on the opening. Oh, thank you. Pilar exclaimed sincerely and, pointing to a cute light green table and wicker chairs, suggested, shall we sit for a while? I haven't had a chance to make any friends yet. It would be great to chat with you in a relaxed atmosphere. Anna gladly agreed. She herself had few friends, many of her schoolmates had scattered to different cities, and she hadn't had time to make new ones. Pilar settled Anna into one of the chairs and went off to get drinks. Taking advantage of her absence, Anna glanced around the interior again. This time she carefully examined the book spines, noticing that many of the titles were related to the sea. We wanted to create a cozy space where you could browse books and immerse yourself in a maritime atmosphere, explained Pilar, returning with beautiful porcelain cups. In my childhood, I loved listening to stories and legends about the sea. Many of them frightened me so much that I couldn't sleep for a long time afterward. But generally, I was a pretty brave girl and sometimes didn't know when to stop. Anna said, and there were distinct melancholic notes in her voice. Memories squeezed her heart, but she forced a smile. She didn't want to dampen the pleasant atmosphere with sadness. Pilar seemed not to notice anything unusual in her new friend's voice. On the contrary, after Anna's words, she seemed to liven up. It was evident that the girl loved talking about books. We have many collections of legends and stories. I collected them from all over the country, ordered them from the farthest corners, found them in tiny shops. Collecting valuable specimens is my hobby. When I had too many books, we decided to open this shop. My husband Sergio supports me in everything. He attached all the shelves, assembled the racks, hung the decorations. It turned out very atmospheric. Anna sincerely praised, and Pilar smiled happily. The books with legends are over there, she said. If you want, choose any for yourself. It will be my gift to you as a thank you for the delicious cheesecake and delightful croissants. While Pilar poured hot cappuccino into the mugs, Anna got up from her chair and approached the shelf. She ran her index finger along the spines, whispering the titles to herself. Finally, her attention was drawn to a pale blue book with shell patterns. There was no title on it. Anna pulled out the book and opened it. It turned out to be a photo album with family photographs. Oh, sorry, Pilar, exclaimed Anna embarrassedly. The new friend came closer. Oh, it's our family photo album. Pilar was surprised. How did it get here? I must have been too tired when I arranged these books and didn't notice it. There were pictures of mountains. Anna began timidly, handing the album to Pilar. My husband Ernesto dreams of them. But we've never traveled. Anna sighed quietly. After what had happened to her in childhood, she was very afraid of traveling. Anything beyond her familiar life seemed dangerous and scary to her. She simply couldn't afford to take risks. Oh, then you need to hear our story. Pilar brightened up, again not noticing the tension in her companion's voice. We've traveled halfway around the world. And let me tell you, traveling is wonderful, and it's never too late to start. Anna nodded. She really liked Pilar's cheerfulness and optimism, and she would like to look at things with similar ease. At that moment, Pilar cast a burning glance at the girl. Here's what I came up with. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you and your husband over for a family dinner at our place, she said. Oh, that's so unexpected. But we'd be delighted to accept. Anna smiled. Suddenly, she felt a fresh breeze blowing into her life with Pilar's arrival. Dressed to the nines, Anna and Ernesto rang the doorbell of their new acquaintance's house on Saturday evening. Pilar, in a green silk dress that suited her well, opened the door and ushered them into the living room. There, they met the girl's husband, a pleasant, slightly short man with a beard and dark wavy hair, who was pouring white wine into glasses. Anna had seen Sergio in a photo album already, and she couldn't wait to hear his stories about the mountains. Yes, she still loved listening to stories. As everyone sat down and started on the delicious dinner, casual conversation flowed at the table. Pilar and Sergio shared their impressions of the town where Ana and Ernesto had spent their entire lives, and they were curious to hear what impression the long-familiar place made on new people. When dinner was over, naturally, the conversation turned to travel, and Sergio was amazed to learn that Ana and Ernesto had never ventured far from home. "I've dreamed of it for so long," admitted Ernesto. "But Ana..." With these words, he took his wife's hand and squeezed it gently. Sergio looked at the woman with surprise. "It's just that," Ana began, taking a deep breath. "It's just that when I was little, I went through a deep tragedy, and..." Pilar looked at her new friend sympathetically. "Oh, I see how hard it is for you to talk about it, my dear," she quickly said. "Let's not dwell on sad things today. Sergio, bring the album, and we'll tell Ana and Ernesto about our trip to the mountains." Pilar's husband got up and went to the bedroom, returning shortly with the familiar blue book in hand. Everyone sat on the large couch and leaned over the album. "Sergio loves taking photos," explained Pilar. "And he's really good at it. But photos on the phone don't bring as much pleasure as when they're printed out. So for our latest wedding anniversary, I ordered this memorable album for Sergio. I pasted the photos myself and drew small illustrations for them." It was clear that Pilar loved her husband very much, and she really wanted to make him happy. "I appreciated it, dear," Sergio replied, kissing his wife on the cheek. Ana reverently flipped through the album pages, where all of Pilar and Sergio's travels were carefully preserved. Finally, they reached the pages with photos taken in the mountains. Sergio began to talk about the ascent, the traditions and superstitions, legends, and local dialects he had learned from guides. Ana listened very attentively, absorbing every word, imagining herself in Sergio and Pilar's place, when suddenly, turning over another page, she stumbled upon something strange that made her freeze. Now Sergio's voice sounded quieter, drowned out by the pounding of her heart. The girl stopped understanding the meaning of his words. Now all of Ana's attention was focused on one of the photos. In it, Sergio stood embracing some young man. Both were smiling, showing rows of white teeth, and it was evident that they were more than pleased with what was happening. The man who caught Ana's attention had straight black hair and dark brown eyes, an upturned nose, and a mole on his cheek. Ana leaned low over the photograph, trying to make out as many details as possible. When she noticed a small scar above his upper lip, she clamped her mouth shut to stifle a scream. Sensing her state, Ernesto took his wife's hand. "Are you okay, dear?" he asked quietly. Ana raised her eyes to him, full of supplication. Pilar also sensed the tension and was now staring intently at Ana, trying to understand what caused it. Only Sergio didn't notice anything unusual and continued talking as if nothing had happened. "And here we are with our guide," he explained, pointing to the photo Ana had been studying for so long. "He's a good guy. We spent so many unforgettable hours together. He has a phenomenal sense of humor. I love such people, although he could also be very quiet and withdrawn at times." "What's his name?" Ana stuttered. "Antonio," Sergio replied. "But we all just called him Tony." "Antonio," the girl murmured, then covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Pilar and Sergio didn't know what to think. Ernesto also paled. "Darling, please don't cry," he whispered, flustered. "This just can't be," Ana exclaimed angrily, still sobbing. Ernesto gently embraced her. Pilar brought water. Sergio bewilderedly took the album in his hands and looked at the photograph with an incomprehensible expression. Finally, Ana calmed down a bit and, taking a sip of water, said, "I'm sorry, this all looks very strange, but the thing is, the man in this photo is my own brother." Ernesto raised his eyebrows in surprise. "But how is that possible? You said he died many years ago when you were little." Ana nodded. "That's how it was. At least, that's what everyone thought. But in this photograph, undoubtedly, it's him." Antonio also had a small scar above his upper lip. He fell off his bike once. Sergio looked up. Tony never lived by the sea, he said. At least, that's what he says. He grew up in the mountains and knows them like the back of his hand, which is why we chose him as our guide. He works at the local tourism center. Wait, Sergio, suddenly intervened Pilar. There's only one way to find out the truth. She squatted down in front of the bewildered Anna and took her hands in hers. Anna, darling, you need to go there, find Antonio, and talk to him. That's the only surefire way to understand whether you're right or wrong. Anna wiped her tears and nodded gratefully. Yes, she said firmly. I will do that. Ernesto nervously took her hand. But what about your fear? Anna squeezed his hand firmly. I'll have to overcome it. That night, Anna couldn't sleep at all. Half-forgotten images, visions, and childhood memories haunted her every moment. Anna was 3 years younger than Antonio. He had always been gentle and obedient. Unlike his sister, she was known as a troublemaker. Her brother constantly got Anna out of all sorts of troubles, and she swore she wouldn't get into any more, but her promises meant nothing that the girl got into adventures at every opportunity. She didn't have many girlfriends back then. She mostly hung out with boys. They climbed rocks, jumped into the sea from steep cliffs. In short, they did all sorts of reckless things that now made Anna's hair stand on end. She never told her parents about this, and even Ernesto didn't know much about her childhood escapades. The only thing that could calm Anna in her childhood was stories. When she listened to the stories of the old lighthouse keeper, the world around her ceased to exist. The girl could sit for hours on the wooden floor by the fire in Alberto's room. Her brother was nearby. Antonio never let her go to the lighthouse alone. There were many legends and tales about the way to it, and the boy was very superstitious, although he never admitted it. I won't survive if some ghost takes you away, Antonio would jokingly say, while his eyes remained serious. Old Alberto greeted them warmly. He brewed sweet cocoa on a small stove and treated them to biscuits, of which he had several boxes. Alberto never left the house. He lived on canned beans, corn, crackers, and tuna. He delighted in Anna and Antonio like a child. Hardly anyone ever visited Alberto, and with the kids, he could also boast of his storytelling talent. The children sat closer to the tiny fireplace, crunching biscuits, listening to the old man, and their imagination carried them to unknown lands where magical and sometimes eerie creatures freely entered people's lives, altering the course of their destinies. Anna liked the legend of the young fisherman the most. Once he saw a mermaid bathing in a quiet cove. Her long hair shimmered brighter than gold in the sun, and her eyes sparkled like two sapphires. When the young man spotted her, the mermaid parted her lips, as delicate as rose petals, and sang a song unfamiliar to him. The fisherman fell madly in love, unable to think of anyone or anything else but the beautiful girl with a fish tail. Every day he would row his boat and sail to the mermaid's cove to listen to her song. The mermaid enjoyed his attention, but one day she grew tired of it all and decided to swim into the open sea. The fisherman followed her. The mermaid swam farther, and the young man struggled to keep up with his beloved. He passed the safe zone and found himself in the open sea in his frail boat. Unfortunately, a storm suddenly arose, but driven by his passion, the young man didn't notice the danger. Finally, the mermaid stopped and addressed the fisherman. "Why do you chase after me?" Hearing her speak to him, the young man nearly went mad with joy. "I love you," he exclaimed, trying to shout over the wind. But the mermaid only shook her head. "I don't believe you. Earthly creatures are too fickle." "But it's true. I love you." The mermaid merely pursed her pink lips. "Your words are just wind." And then, for the third time, the young man shouted to the mermaid, "I love you more than life. If you don't believe my words, look into my heart." In that moment, the young man tore his heart from his chest and threw it to the mermaid. She caught it in her palm, and instantly it turned to gold. The young man fell lifeless. The mermaid shrugged indifferently, holding the golden heart to her chest, and swam away into the depths. They say that ever since, when a storm brews at sea, a ghostly boat emerges from the waves, carrying a pale young man. His eyes are closed, his hands clutch his chest, where there's a hole, and his lips silently sing the mermaid song. The young man wants his heart back, but cannot retrieve it. The mermaid has securely hidden it at the bottom of the sea. At this point, Anna's eyes always welled up with tears. Is there really nothing, absolutely nothing we can do to help the poor fisherman? I feel so sorry for him, the girl said once. Antonio hugged his sister tightly and stroked her hair to calm her down. It's just a legend, Anna, he said confidently. There's no such thing as a lovelorn ghost fisherman. Hearing these words, the old man Alberto quietly shook his head. Whether it exists or not, they also say that if someone throws a beautiful ornament into the open sea during a storm, the mermaid will take it, and the young man's heart will be returned, and then the fisherman will finally find peace. Anna fidgeted anxiously. Can you hear me, Antonio? We can help him. I have a beautiful pendant that my mom and dad gave me last Christmas. Are you sure you're okay parting with it, Anna? Antonio was surprised. Of course not, if it helps the poor fisherman. Anna replied fervently. The girl has a big heart, the old lighthouse keeper muttered quietly to himself. But she's recklessly brave. It's a pity Anna didn't hear those words back then, and if she did, she didn't pay attention to them. She was only 11. Can we go up to the lighthouse now? Anna asked. Alberto nodded. He couldn't refuse the girl anything either. Go ahead, kids. I'll clear the table for now. Satisfied, Anna jumped to her feet and ran out of the room. The old man groaned as he got up from his chair and started clearing the table. Antonio followed his sister, but hesitated at the threshold for a moment. His shoelace came untied. He bent down to tie it, and at that moment, thinking he was alone in the room, the old man muttered, "The boy's growing up nicely, even though he's not my own." Antonio's face froze. He straightened up and left the room on shaky legs. At the door, the boy stopped and stood for a moment, pressing himself against the wall, trying to calm his pounding heart. Somewhere far out at sea, a roll of thunder sounded. Anna didn't notice her brother's change in mood when he went upstairs. She was too engrossed in the rotating lens around the lamp. This sight always fascinated the girl. When they descended and said goodbye to Alberto, heading home, silver streaks of lightning kept slicing through the horizon. Storm, Anna said thoughtfully, turning to look at the lighthouse. Its warm light filled her with hope. Antonio didn't reply. His brows were furrowed, lips tightly pressed. What's wrong with you? The sister asked, but her brother just shook his head in response. Anna sighed. Antonio had been taciturn before, but not to this extent. However, the girl's thoughts quickly shifted. She felt for the pendant she had mentioned at Alberto's house, then glanced at the raging sea. Waves were crashing fiercely against the sandy shore they walked along. Nearby, the girl noticed a lone boat. Seeing it, Anna abruptly stopped. Antonio, lost in his thoughts, bumped into his sister, nearly knocking her over. "What's wrong with you?" he exclaimed, startled, snapping back to reality. "There's a storm at sea," Anna murmured and, pulling him by the sleeve, exclaimed, "Antonio, we have to do this. Right now." Her brother didn't immediately understand what she meant, so for a while, he looked at her with confusion. Anna, on the other hand, impatiently hopped on one foot. "Antonio, can't you see it already? This is our chance to help the ghostly fisherman," she exclaimed. "The pendant is on me right now." Antonio flinched. He finally began to understand what Anna had started. "Don't even think about it," he said calmly. "It's too dangerous." But Anna wasn't about to listen to her brother. She was already determinedly making her way to the boat. "If you're a coward, I'll row alone," she shouted, satisfied to see the oars in place. Anna started pushing the boat towards the water. It was heavier than the girls had anticipated. "We're going home," she heard her brother's angry voice nearby. "You can go, but not without me," she replied. "I won't back down. The ghostly fisherman needs my help." Antonio realized arguing with his sister was pointless. He too started pushing the boat. "We'll drift just a bit away from the shore," he yelled. "That should be enough." "But what if the mermaid doesn't find the pendant and doesn't return the fisherman's heart?" Anna hesitated. "She has servants everywhere," Antonio confidently replied. "Fish, turtles, jellyfish. Whatever they find, they bring to their sea queen. So don't worry, the sailor's heart will return to him." Anna calmed down. Her older brother always told her the truth. They got into the boat, and Antonio started rowing. Several times he stopped and asked Anna to throw the pendant, but the girl shook her head and said they needed to drift a little further from the shore. Reluctantly, Antonio continued to row. The wind grew stronger, the waves higher. The boat mercilessly rocked from side to side, and rowing became increasingly difficult. Finally, Anna took pity and said she was ready to throw the pendant into the water. "Dear mermaid, please return the heart to the unhappy ghostly youth, and take this beautiful pendant instead." Anna said a short speech and, swinging her arm, threw the pendant as far as she could into the sea. At that moment, a huge wave crashed onto the boat, and the siblings found themselves in the water. By that time, they had drifted quite far, and the depth beneath them was substantial. Anna struggled with all her might, but every time she resurfaced, she barely had time to breathe before another wave engulfed her. She wanted to call out to Antonio, but of course, it was impossible. Anna felt her strength diminishing, and the waves tossed her around with a hissing sound, pulling her towards a seductive starless abyss. Suddenly, she heard someone's gentle, beckoning voice. At first, she was delighted, thinking it was her mother, but reason reminded her that Ines was waiting for her at home. The sound repeated, and Anna realized with horror that it was a song. She didn't understand the words, they belonged to an unearthly language, but that's how she imagined mermaids singing. Anna couldn't fight anymore. She closed her eyes and let the melody carry her away. She didn't feel someone picking her up and pulling her towards the surface anymore. Anna heard voices again. They came and went, sometimes quieter, sometimes louder, but the girl couldn't grasp their meaning. She struggled to open her eyes, not understanding where she was. At first, it was dark around her, then blurry white spots appeared in her field of vision, gradually taking shape. They were faces, but Anna couldn't tell if they were human or mermaid. She didn't recognize anyone. "It seems like she's coming to, but her consciousness hasn't fully returned," Anna heard. Someone's strong arms held her tightly. She stared at this person for a long time until she realized it was her father. Then she heard someone crying. "Antonio! Where's my boy?" a woman screamed. It took a few moments for Anna to realize it was her mother. "Where is he?" she whispered with her lips. Her father, who had been anxiously watching her all this time, stroked her head and whispered softly, "It's okay, Anna. We'll find him. The sea brought you back to us, it will bring him back too." Anna closed her eyes and pressed against her father's cool cheek. She quietly prayed for her brother to be by her side again. But her father was wrong. The sea didn't bring back Antonio. His body was never found. For a long time, Anna blamed herself for what happened, but her parents did everything they could to comfort her. They talked for a long time about what had happened, convincing the girl that sadness wouldn't bring Antonio back. "If God took our boy to himself, then it was better for him," Ines said, although her motherly heart was breaking with sorrow. Gradually, Anna's pain subsided a little, and her former cheerfulness returned to her. However, the trace of the tragedy left a scar on her heart forever. Since the death of her brother, Anna became calmer, more sensible. She realized that she was now alone with her parents, and that she was now responsible for her actions. She never risked her own life again. Since then, she was afraid to leave home, to leave her parents, to do anything unusual. And then Anna found out that Antonio probably survived. But why didn't he come home? Did he forget who he was? Or didn't he want to come back? Anna didn't know the answers to these questions. Soon she would have to find out all this. Ernesto drove her to the airport. Anna tightly held a purse in her hands, which contained her passport and a plane ticket, the first in her life. Ernesto really wanted to, but couldn't fly with her. He had an urgent order at work. "Find your brother and find out everything without me, and next time we'll fly together," he promised, kissing Anna goodbye. The girl hugged her husband and walked to the exit. She was a little nervous before the flight, but at the same time felt an indescribable excitement. When the plane took off, Anna almost screamed with joy. She had never felt anything like it before. Her hometown gradually shrank in size, and an endless sea spread out in front of her. She looked out the window and couldn't believe that all this was happening for real. Then the plane rose above the clouds, and Anna found herself in a magical heavenly land. Overwhelmed with emotions, she felt a sweet tiredness and, closing her eyes, drifted off to sleep. When the girl woke up, the plane was already descending. Anna looked out of the window and saw the mountains. Their snowy peaks were gleaming in the sun. The plane landed smoothly, and Anna turned on her phone to message Ernesto that she was okay. After retrieving her luggage, the girl called a taxi and headed to the hotel her husband had booked. The town was very cozy, with a mountain freshness in the air. Accustomed to the sea air, Anna was surprised by the new aroma and found it pleasant. She noticed flower beds everywhere. Everything was clean and tidy. After leaving her belongings at the hotel, she took a shower, changed clothes, and went out intending to have dinner somewhere. Almost immediately, she stumbled upon a charming café and went in. The elderly hostess welcomed her warmly, escorted Anna to a table, and brought the menu. "We have homemade dishes. I'm sure you'll like it," she said. Anna ordered vegetable lasagna and cappuccino. Through the panoramic windows, there was a magical view of the mountains. The day was leaning towards sunset, and the white peaks now had a pink hue. It was very beautiful. Anna took a deep breath, feeling happy. "If only I could find Antonio," she said quietly aloud. Tomorrow she would go to the tourism center and talk to him. All night Anna had troubled dreams. Here she wakes up and wants to leave the hotel, but she can't find the key. Or she opens the closet, and it's empty, all her clothes are gone. In another dream, the girl comes to the tourism center, and she is led to Antonio's office, but instead of her brother, she meets a ghost. In the third dream, she drowns again and finds herself in an underwater kingdom, where her brother sits on the throne with a mermaid tail. Anna woke up at dawn and couldn't fall asleep again. Waiting for 8 o'clock, she got up, took a hot shower, dressed, and left the hotel. The center opened at 9. Anna had a strong coffee with a bun at a nearby cafe and called a taxi. She needed to go to the other end of the city. The center was located at the foot of the mountain. On the way, Anna nervously played with her purse strap. She was terribly afraid that her journey had been in vain, and that the young guide in the photo would turn out to be a complete stranger to her. On the other hand, the thought that in a quarter of an hour she would come face to face with her own brother, who had died many years ago, also filled her with awe. After paying the taxi driver, Anna took a deep breath and got out of the car. The center was already open, and the girl, entering the wide hall, headed to the reception desk. "How can I help you?" a pretty hazel-eyed girl with her hair slicked back into a smooth hairstyle asked. Round glasses and horn frames suited her very well. Anna hesitated for a moment, then collected her thoughts and said, "I'm looking for a young man named Antonio. He works here." "Antonio Gonzalez," the girl politely clarified. "Yes, I think that's his surname now," Anna nodded. The girl looked at her somewhat surprised, but didn't ask anything further. "I'll check his schedule now," the receptionist said. Anna nodded again, feeling her knees trembling as she waited. "Do you want to book a tour with him?" the receptionist clarified. "Well," Anna began uncertainly, then unexpectedly for herself said, "I'm his sister. We haven't seen each other for a long time." The girl looked at her intently. "Strange, he said he doesn't have a family." Anna didn't know what to reply. "All right," the girl nodded. "Let me escort you to him. He's in his office." Upon hearing these words, Anna's heart beat faster. She forced herself to nod and weakly smiled. The girl stepped out from behind the counter and headed towards the elevator. Anna followed her on trembling legs. The elevator doors opened, both girls entered, and the receptionist pressed the button for the third floor. The elevator slowly ascended. Anna felt like she might faint from excitement at any moment. Finally, the girl led her to a closed door. Anna managed to notice Antonio's nameplate. The receptionist knocked and, without waiting for a response, partially opened the door. "Antonio, you have a visitor," she said, letting Anna enter first. Trembling all over, Anna entered the office. The first thing she saw were maps hanging on the walls. It seemed like every corner of the earth was represented there. Then Anna noticed a simple wooden desk with a young man sitting behind it. He had black hair and dark brown, almost black eyes. He was staring at her intently. "How can I?" the man began, but couldn't finish the sentence. For a while, the girl silently looked at him, then whispered barely audibly, "Antonio, it's me, Anna." He nervously ran his fingers through his unruly hair, stood up, pushed his chair back, and walked to the window. Then he turned back to the girl and looked at her again. "Anna," he whispered. The girl took a step closer. "Is it really you?" she whispered, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. Silently nodding, Antonio approached the girl and hugged her tightly. "But how?" Anna tried to ask, but her tongue wouldn't obey. She simply hugged her long-lost brother, as if he were the most precious treasure unexpectedly returned to her. Both of them were crying. Then Antonio sat the girl down in a chair and sat next to her, gazing into her eyes for a long time. "Forgive me, little sister," he finally murmured. Anna sobbed. "No, it's me who should ask for forgiveness. It's all my fault." "No, Anna, you're not to blame for anything. But I acted recklessly. We almost drowned because of me. For years, I thought you died because of my foolish whim." "Yes, sometimes you were simply unbearable," Antonio confirmed bitterly. "But, as you can see, everything turned out fine, and I managed to survive." Looking into his familiar eyes, Anna nodded, feeling slightly calmed, but she still had so many questions swirling in her head. She forced herself to focus. "Antonio, but what happened to you? Why didn't you come back home? Why didn't you let us know you were okay?" Antonio closed his eyes, as if some long unfelt pain suddenly made itself known inside him. "Forgive me, my dear. I couldn't do otherwise." "But why?" Anna asked quietly. Antonio opened his eyes and looked at her. "You see, I found out something. Then, what happened, happened. We got caught in a whirlpool. I saw you drowning, and I did everything to save you. With great difficulty, but I managed to swim to the shore. You were unconscious. I performed CPR on you, and when I realized your life was out of danger, I decided to leave." "But why, Antonio?" Anna exclaimed, tears welling up. Antonio lowered his head. "I found out that I'm not our parents' biological son," he barely whispered. There was so much pain in those words that Anna's breath caught for a moment. What Antonio said was so shocking that she couldn't utter a sound. "Old Alberto let it slip, not knowing that I heard," Antonio explained. "And you decided not to come back home?" Antonio nodded silently. "I was lost. I remembered how hard it was for our parents. They never had extra money. Suddenly, I felt like a burden. And I decided it would be better for everyone this way." "How could you?" Anna burst out. Antonio stood up and walked to the window. "You'll never understand that," he replied coldly. Anna approached and hugged him from behind. "I'm sorry." Antonio quietly sobbed. "I didn't understand what I was doing then. And then it seemed too late to come back. I thought everyone had long forgotten about me." "We never forgot about you," Anna replied fervently. "Mom and I almost died of grief. Dad became so silent. We were never the same after losing you." Antonio let out a quiet sigh. "What's done is done," he whispered bitterly. Anna remained silent for a moment, still standing behind Antonio, holding him tightly by the shoulders. Outside the window stretched a majestic panorama of mountains. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Antonio said softly. Anna nodded silently. "The mountains healed me," he continued. "Only here have I come to terms with my loss. Here, I understood who I am." Anna stood up beside Antonio, turning to face her brother and looking into his eyes. "But now you'll come back home," she whispered. Antonio didn't answer. "Please," Anna pleaded. "You have no idea how much joy it will bring to our parents. You will bring them back to life, happiness, and faith. You must do this." Antonio nervously ran his hand through his hair again. "Are you sure, Anna?" he asked doubtfully. "Stop hesitating. You have to do this. Let's go home together. Then, if you want, you can return to your mountains. But Mom and Dad need to know that you're alive. You have to see them. Even if they're not your biological parents, they love you more than anyone else in the world." Antonio smiled, nodded, and hugged Anna tightly. "Thank you, little sister." The next day, they sat together on the plain, heading back to the sea. Anna recounted her life, her beloved husband, her job at the cafe, her new neighbors who helped her find him, and her first ever flight. "Your world is just beginning, little sister. The whole world is at your feet," Antonio exclaimed joyfully. "I promise I'll show you and your Ernesto the mountains." Anna smiled contentedly. "I only have one question left," Antonio suddenly said thoughtfully. "What's that?" Anna asked, surprised. "I wonder if your elusive fisherman's long-suffering heart has returned." Antonio smiled. And they both laughed. Below them, the familiar old lighthouse blinked with warm light. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.